Bottom line is, if you have an organization of people who are excited about being part of what you're doing, that buys you an awful lot of goodwill. People are going to stick around a long time.
Have you seen some uncoachable leaders in your time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I usually fire them, pretty quickly.
I'd love your opinion, Steve, on where we're headed as the world with machine learning and AI.
It's intuitively obvious that AI gives people a lot of power very quickly, and we intuit, I think accurately as humans, that that's not a good thing. That gets abused very quickly.
Today we are in excellent company with my friend Steve Little. Hey, Steve Little, when I saw you were on my calendar today to be interviewed, I was like, I'm excited because there's so much wealth of knowledge that you have. Why don't I give you a moment to sort of introduce yourself to everyone and your background?
Well, okay. Well, thank you very much, Casey. I appreciate that. I guess from a standpoint of business, that seems to be the principal topic here. I've had a lot of success in my career. I've started my first business when I was 13 and sold it when I was 15 back in 1973 for about $250,000. So that's a couple $1 million in today's money. And it's really interesting. I learned something in that experience, and the reason I start my story there is that I couldn't have articulated what I learned, but I took that learning and I carried it with me going forward throughout my time in college and then afterwards in business. Long and the short of it is I built 6 different software companies and took them each to 9-figure exits, and sort of applying and reapplying that same set of principles over and over and over again. And it's worked for me. I ended up out in the the San Francisco Bay Area, working with a bunch of top tier venture people out there, working in their portfolio companies, helping them, generate high rates of return. It was sort of like turnaround work, but not really. These were healthy companies. They just wanted to accelerate the value realization of the companies, and earned a pretty good reputation for doing that, and retired 6 or 7 times, and sort of found myself, back in my ranch in Virginia. A friend of mine called up and said, "Hey, you know a lot of stuff people want to know. I bet if we just put up a LinkedIn page, you get people to schedule appointments with you." And I said, "Look, as long as all I have to do is show up, that's fine by me. You can ask me anything you want, but don't ask me to build websites and make videos, and I'm not doing any of that." So he did. He wrote a LinkedIn page. It's the one that's up there now, as a matter of fact. And it offered an hour of my time. It charged between $1,500 and $2,500, depending. And I ended up, booked 6 or 7 hours a week, just answering tough questions for people. And I was thinking, man, this is pretty nice. I'm sitting out on my porch, making pretty good money after a pretty good career. And man, it's not bad. So I thought I was done, but during a meditation one morning, the universe let me know that I was not done, that my job now was to replicate my knowledge and help other people accomplish the kinds of things that I'd accomplished. So long and the short of it, I started taking those conversations I was having with all those small and middle market companies, and I turned them into a process that ultimately became the foundation of my investment bank. I own and operate a boutique investment bank called Zero Limits Ventures. And through that, we help business owners accelerate the value of their business and position themselves for high return exits in the future. And along the way, we meet a lot of really great people and have a lot of fun. And we feel like, I feel passionate about helping business owners get what they deserve. I think the entrepreneurs in this world, I respect the big businesses, but they're not the ones driving the economy. It's the entrepreneurial economy that drives the business, drives the country. And I feel like, I want to make sure those people get what they deserve, because they're making the sacrifices. They're taking the risks. They're the ones missing Christmas morning or birthdays or Thanksgivings or holidays or, afternoon soccer games with the kids or whatever. That's the price they're paying, to really offer the kind of services and products that they innovate. And I feel strongly that that's a really important thing in our economy. Then over time, sort of the last chapter was I I had an epiphany one day that, I just don't think that we can solve the problems that plague humanity, be it, plastic in the ocean or homeless people or starving people or people with no water, whatever, disease, whatever you call it, poverty. I don't think we can solve those problems with charitable giving alone. I think everybody should give, don't get me wrong. There's a reason the tithe is in the book. But I also think that what we need are businesses that build sustainable solutions. So sustainable businesses building sustainable solutions to the problems that plague us. And I think that's the way to solve this problem. And so I pivoted what I was doing just a little bit to really get focused on that. Now, when a company comes to work with me, if they don't have an impact mission, if not committed to giving back or doing something significant in the world, but when we start, they're going to when we finish.
What an amazing journey you've been on. So something you said, and I'm curious, based on where you are today, Steve, so now you've dedicated your life to helping entrepreneurs, business owners go to market, if you will, and get the most value possible. What's the most common question? Because when you were sitting on your back porch, when you were just doing your per hour and you hadn't even put the full processes together as you've done today, what was the most common question you would receive?
I think it was because it was sort of baited. It was conceptualized by the content of the LinkedIn page. So it's a little bit of a trick. People wanted to know how to drive value to their business. They want to know how to maximize the value of their enterprise. And what was fascinating about that is I started out just asking a couple of questions. Like the first question I would ask is, what's your exit strategy? And you might be amazed, but almost none of them had an exit strategy. They had an idea about an exit, like we're going to grow and someone's going to buy us, or, well, we'd like to take it public someday, or I'm going to give it to my kids, or, something like that. But not a strategy. And, that would be my replies. That's very interesting and noble, but not a strategy. So I'm looking for a strategy. And I think this is one of those things I learned as a young man, not realizing that that's what I was doing, is I was implementing exit strategies to the businesses I was building, right? And in order to generate an exit strategy, you have to know, what people are going to value, what the buyer cares about. Just like a product, if you go out to sell a product, you want to find out who's the market for my product and what do they want to see, what do they want to experience, what do they want to know before they buy. And your job is to give them that information so they can make a decision to buy your product. So I would ask the question, do you know what's driving the value of your business? And this one really surprised me. Basically, nobody did. Everybody thought that EBITDA, revenue and EBITDA, were the drivers of value. And I think that's because we have this calculation called valuation, which is based on revenue and EBITDA. And people think that that's what it means, is that, well, I'm going to do this calculation. I have this number called a valuation, and that's what my business is worth. And it's really important to understand that that's not what your business is worth. That is a marker of fair market, but it's not actually what it's worth. What it's worth is the accumulative effect of lots of other factors, people, processes, intellectual property, both formal and informal, the market, all these other factors. So I made it as part of what I took out of these interviews early on is I created this process which evaluates 24 different factors. So it's my contention in the market that in order to maximize the potential of your business, you need to understand where you are in the value dynamic of all 24 drivers.
It's got to be incredibly fulfilling work to see someone who's worked ample number of years to try to figure out how to help them get the most value for that. Because I'm laughing when you said, most people don't know their exit strategy. I'm that classic entrepreneur, opened it 22 years ago, had great intention, great vision for what I wanted to accomplish, but never thinking that was my initial, I'm opening it to leave it. Now, I completely understand it at a whole different level. So anybody listening in who is an entrepreneur, I think you have to answer that question up front.
Well, it's easier. I mean, the sooner you know, the better off you'll be. I mean, that's just basically
it changes all your decisions, right? Because how I'm going to build certain processes, am I going to create scale, recurring revenue, all the things that are going to probably on your 24 point.
No, exactly right. I mean, I say to people, I don't know how you make a decision without knowing what that is. How do you decide what a priority is? Right? How do you decide what to invest in? You know, I mean, the assumption is that if I invest in growth, I'm investing in value, but that's turned out to be not a very good assumption.
What's been the most rewarding for you in
Yeah.
a business? Is there an example of a business where you really helped and give that, share that?
One of the critical value accelerators that I identified and we make part of our process, and certainly I observe, is an impact mission. And let me explain what I mean by that. I'm not talking about a bolt-on charity, although that's not a bad thing to do. But I'm talking about something that's deeply embedded in the culture of the company so that people recognize the company. Like Patagonia is the kind of company I'm talking about. You know, Patagonia is what they're about is having an impact.
Of course.
Right? And that's why people buy. That's why people want to work there. That's why people want to invest in that company and so forth. And so that's the goal, is to get the founders that I work with to understand that that's what they're looking for. They want to build that. And here's the thing, is that you can't just sort of assign one, you know, like yours is going to be water. You're going to make water for people, right? There has to be something to it. And so one of the really enjoyable parts of what I do is help people figure out what is their mission. You know, what do they really want to do? How do they want to have an impact? You know, what do they want to leave behind when they're done? And it's amazing to see when they find it, when they trigger on it, you know, everything about them changes. They glow, you know, their face changes, everything changes because now they're doing something. They're really up to something, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah,
then
you wake up with a different.
totally. I mean, it's a totally different motivation. They manage their business differently. You talk to their line managers, they're like, I don't know what you did to him, but he's a completely different person. You know, we're on a mission now, and it's pretty exciting. And then, of course, at the other end, when they accomplish it, you know, I mean, the view that I have is that one of the reasons why we want to accelerate value is, you know, not to be greedy, but to actually transform their capacity to have impact. I mean, the fundamental reality is it's actually a biblical concept that if I have more, I can do more. That's it. So,
Man, you are speaking my language. I'm reflecting back, like my mission, but you just said it's got to be deeply embedded,
yeah.
which creates the culture. But you know, we've got this. I don't know if you feel this, but we're in the selfish society, right?
Oh, yeah.
Selfie,
Big time.
right?
Yes, big time.
But there is no fulfillment, and that's what certain generations are going to learn quickly. There's no fulfillment in the selfies, but there's way more fulfillment in the selfless,
Yeah.
where it's not about me. It's about having an impact and giving back. And I was gifted with certain skills and abilities, but I'll be the first to tell you, I didn't know that in my 20s. I had to learn that, and I had to learn it the hard way. I had an amazing leader tell me it's not about you.
Yeah. When I mentioned earlier about, you know, that's, you know, the meditation experience I had, you know, I began meditating when I was younger and carried that practice forward just because I think it's a good, healthy practice for the mind. But, you know, I was connected at a different level that day. And, you know, when I got the message, I mean, it was very much a receipt of a message, you know. You know, the sky didn't open or anything like that, but it was very clearly.
You heard it.
I heard it.
You heard it.
I heard it, right? And it was very clear that you are not done. It's time for you to carry this forward for other people. And that to me is the point that you're making, right? Is that I think everybody has that event in their lives. And when we're younger, typically we haven't had it yet. I mean, there are people out there that have, and, you know,
Sure.
God bless them. But many of us just get busy doing what we were told to do, or, you know, fighting for a dollar or whatever. You know, we just get wrapped up in that. And, you know, while most people, I think, have a deep-seated inclination, sort of a desire to do something in a significant way for others, I think that the majority of people are like that. It's usually like, I don't know how, or I have to have this much success first, and then I'll do that. Like, you know, I remember saying that myself. Is like, well, once I have, you know, millions of dollars, I'll give it away. You know, and that's not how it works.
It is not how it works. You know what's so funny is you just mentioned you were meditating in I'm going to call it the later years, and you realized, hey, I got to give back. I have a major challenge with all these amazing human beings
Yeah.
who are ready for retirement because they've learned, they've got wisdom, and then they just go off into the sunset and they retire. And I'm like, no. You can't retire.
Yeah.
You've accumulated this enormous amount of wisdom to share back to future generations. So I'm so glad that you're doing that today.
Yeah.
And the manner in which you're doing and how you've dedicated to entrepreneurs like me and entrepreneurs around the world. So in your 24 points, because I haven't gone through it yet.
Yeah.
You heard me say yet, right? The 24 points, impact mission's huge, by the way. I believe that is one of your 24. Can you share a few more for any business owners listening in?
Yeah, well, it's sort of organized. There's 18 drivers and 6 accelerators, and the drivers are really more about alleviating constraint. The idea is that we all have formed our businesses usually around a set of personal skills or aptitudes, or those of people that we've got on our team, and so those tend to be things that aren't full of gaps. And then there's areas that, we're not particularly skilled at, or we don't have the right people on board for, and that creates sort of value gaps. So, that set of drivers is really about understanding, where are the gaps, let's fill them in, right? And so these are things like, one of the biggest ones we run across all the time is a lack of deep knowledge about your market. You say to somebody, what's the size of your market? Well, it's big. Everybody wants what we want. That's like the kiss of death, right? Well, not everybody wants what you want, okay? What you have, right? Okay. So there's that bit of it. And really, when we take people through that part of the process, we're introducing them to a concept of market understanding that they've never had before, right? So that's one driver. Jumping to the accelerators, obviously impact mission is an accelerator. So these things are about how to move more value into the business. So it's not just about relieving constraints and realizing value gain by eliminating the things that are constraining your value. This is about creating new value, right? And these are the things that are really impactful. This is where the big acceleration occurs. The drivers, moves the needle a little. The accelerators move the needle a lot, right? And so these are things like impact mission, data strategies. People often ignore the value of the data they're gathering. Other things like social intelligence. So it gets confused sometimes with social media. It's really not social media. It's how do you use the social engagement that you have with your business in an intelligent way? And how do you use that to actually drive the decisions of your business, right? I'll give you an example of one. We had a client some years ago. They were an Amazon seller. They sold protective seat covers for your car. And they focused on the dog owner was their vertical. I mean, the seat cover was good to protect for anything, but they just, picked the market for dogs. And the interesting thing about their product was it was almost twice as much money as everybody else's. But they were the number one seller. They sold more than anybody else. So, it was one of those cases where the most expensive product outsold all the other products, which was sort of interesting, right? Because just the seat cover, right? And what we found out, though, was that back in those days, Amazon's store, you could interact with the people who left product reviews. So someone would leave a 5-star review, and instead of just thinking, hey, great, we got another 5-star review. They had 5,000 of those, by the way. But instead of just, being thrilled about that, they would respond and say, hey, thanks for the great review. What kind of dog do you have? And the person would write back, oh, we have Doberman Pinschers. We love Doberman Pinschers. So you got German Shepherds ourselves. And they get these deep conversations going in the product review section. That was worth 2 points. That's 200% value gain just because of that.
Wow.
Right? Because they had intelligence about their market. Because those people that were commenting, they'd say, can you think of anything else that you need from us? Hey, it'd be great if you had something to cover the side panel of my door, because my dog jumps up on the window all the time, getting claw marks in my door. So they invented a side panel. Another person said, that dog's always jumping into the front seat. Can you have something that, so they made a hammock style, right? So they got product ideas and product innovations that way, right? And then they started doing community things where they'd go to an area like Atlanta and they'd meet up at a park and have, 250 four canine owners show up at the park. you know?
Brilliant.
So that's social intelligence, right? So that's a huge accelerator of value, as I pointed out. The data strategies I mentioned, impact mission I mentioned. So those are the big ones. Culture, activated culture. What this is about is sort of building on this notion of being aligned around the mission, but it's activating that culturally inside the company, so that
Gotcha.
it becomes a brand identity. And people
Sure.
that work there are proud of working there because of the brand identity. And that's a huge driver, a huge accelerator value for a whole number of reasons. Some of them outside, some of them inside. The bottom line is, if you have an organization of people who are excited about being part of what you're doing, that buys you an awful lot of goodwill. People are going to stick around a long time. They're going to maybe take a little less pay when you have a tightening of the budget, and know that you're going to take care of them at the other end when you have plenty of budget. That kind of relationship. And I don't need to tell you, the cost of recruiting is really high. So
Really
if
high.
you can keep people, keep them, right? So
Steve, how big a play is the leadership skills among your 24 points? And what attributes do you think, based on now that you've advised countless companies and helped them go to market, maybe sort of narrow it down? How big is it? How important is it? And what are the top attributes of the most successful ones?
yeah, that's sort of a setup. It's important, obviously. There needs to be a clear leadership. We just talked a little bit about it. Creating an activated culture. It starts with the leader, right? So the leader's values establish the value trajectory of the company. So if the leader has deep-seated, excellent core values, work values, relationship values, you name it, then those are going to be imbued within the company. And it's a natural thing. They don't have to work at it. It's just what happens, right? Your company becomes a reflection of you as the leader. That's a fact. If you're a bad person, you're going to build a bad company. That's a fact. Right? If you're a good person, you're going to build a good company, right? If you're a great person, you're going to build a great company. I mean, that's just the way it is, right? So the person in leadership, there are skills, yes, of course, but even equally, if not more importantly, it's, who is the person? I mean, what are their qualities? What are they doing to cultivate those qualities, to grow themselves as a leader? The number one time occupation, I think, for the guy at the top is you got to work 80% of the time on yourself. You work on yourself, everything else will fall into place. You don't need to worry about all those other people. They already know what they're doing. That's why you hired them, right? You don't need to tell them what you're doing. Your job is to get stuff out of the way. Let them do what they do, right?
Sure.
When I see a dominant leader, sort of hovering over his people, or checking, or worse yet, dominating his people, that's a conversation we have to have right away, because that's got to stop. I mean, and if a guy won't stop, then I can't work with him, right? It's just simple as that.
Have you seen some uncoachable leaders in your time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No question about it. As a matter of fact, and I usually fire them, pretty quickly. I give them a lot of effort. I give them a lot of coaching and feedback and mentoring and help them. I give them tools and books and tapes and methods. And those that take it on will usually come back to me and go, wow, I really appreciate you. You grew me as a person, and now I'm much better at what I did. My company is actually better than I thought it would be. And that's a great thing. And that's a win. But there are times when that doesn't happen, when they just say, no, it's my way or the highway, and, I'm paying you, you do what I say. And I'll say, well, I'll tell you, that doesn't work that way for me. So carry on. Here's your money. I'm done. So,
Well, I'd love your opinion, Steve, on where we're headed as the world with machine learning and AI.
Yeah.
How prepared do you think leaders are to adapt to the new era that's in front of us, where they may be managing more machines than people?
Yeah, that some of my companies are heavily into AI, so I have sort of a bifurcated vision of this. And I went to a conference recently. KPMG did a big AI conference in Salt Lake City several months back, and I attended that, and all the top whiz-bangs of the AI world were there. And, I heard a common theme repeated every time anybody spoke, whether it was on the stage or just standing around in the lobby, how great AI was and how scary it is, right? And, and that's, those things seem to be traveling together. And part of it is that we haven't matured as a consuming population, commercially or not. We haven't matured enough, and I'll call it sort of the moral fabric is tattered enough that's why it feels so scary, right? I mean, we just know that if somebody can get away with something with an AI, they're going to try to get away with it. And it's intuitively obvious that AI gives people a lot of power very quickly, and we intuit, I think accurately as humans, that's not a good thing. That gets abused very quickly, much more quickly than it used to. Not so much in my day, but in my father's day or his father's day even. It took a long time for people to turn rotten. Now they turn rotten pretty quick. But
it's interesting because we deal with leaders on a regular basis, right? Since we teach leadership, and my position right now is very few are prepared for the future and what it's going to look like.
Yeah, I think that's probably a true statement. And I think that there is a responsibility in industry to fill some gaps here. So for instance, one of the biggest areas that is really quite acute in our world because of one of our companies is content ownership, right, and authorship. So, somebody creates something, whether it's a blog post or a video or an audio or whatever, digested by an AI, recreated, regenerated with a different author, a different picture, a different voice, different language even, right, and remarketed. And now you no longer own that. That's now somebody else's property. And my point is that is a structural problem with the market and with the technology foundation. There's no way around that problem until you address those structural issues. And so we see a lot of companies, one of the companies in my portfolio is focused very heavily on dealing with that structural issue, utilizing other technology. So there you would have a control of the content ownership. You'd have a mechanism to say, this is real content from this person, really, this is not over here. So, you now will push that discernment into the market where it belongs. So I do think there are going to be a lot of problems. But I also think that we have really, really smart innovators in the generations that are coming. And I think that they see these things and can innovate solutions at a pace and at a capacity far beyond what we did in my generation. So I think they go together. So I'm not really a doomsdayer. I don't think we're bound for catastrophe. I don't think we're going to see the Terminator or anything like that. But I do think that there are going to be some problems, and there's going to be some trouble, and we're going to need to be able to react very quickly. I think the legal system is not nearly sufficiently prepared to deal with the complexities that are going to emerge. And I think leadership is really the key. And so to your point, I think that you got to be really fast learner. You got to, suck it up all the time. You got, I read and listen and listen and read. And when I'm done with that, I listen and read some more, because you have to know what's going on in order to make the decisions that you're going to have to make. And, people that aren't really paying attention are going to get blindsided, and they're going to get hurt badly, right? So.
Well, I think the fear comes in the lack of knowledge, right? So that's where I'm finding that there's very few leaders today that are astute enough, and I'm saying astute maybe isn't right, maybe it's not the right word, but
well, I think it is.
They haven't dedicated themselves to learn what the future is going to look like. And there's so much opportunity. And so instead of saying scary, it should look at it as instead of being in fear, look at it as opportunity to advance your outcomes at a level you can't even fathom.
No, that's exactly.
And there's going to be countless jobs that are going to be gone for sure. The ones that will win will be the innovators, the creators, and those that know how to lead. Yeah. Because if you're just doing some simple tasks, you will be replaced over time. So I think there's an opportunity for our entire education system to be changed. We don't teach the kids how to be creative. We don't teach them how to be innovative. We put them in a box and have them yes/no questions as opposed to possibility questions. Anyway, I could go on.
Yeah,
and on.
no.
So
We can do a whole show series on the educational system. So.
Listen, we might talk offline about my where's my heart, and I'm watching the children being dumbed down as opposed to built up. And,
it's crazy.
We got to radically change that as well. So with that, let's end with a question I love. It's one of my favorite questions. And by the way, I'll do two questions. One is, who's the ideal client for you that you help on a regular basis? So if they're listening in going, I want to call Steve, why would they want to call you, and who are they? Mm-hmm. And then I'll end with my favorite last question.
Oh, okay. I got to do them one at a time. From a business perspective, remember, I sort of see the thing in two sections. But from a business perspective, we're talking to clients that are, the large end of small and the small end of middle market, right? So, that size business that understand that there are value dynamics that they don't fully appreciate or realize, and might have an inclination of selling their business sometime in the future. They've come to the realization that, I like to say it this way, whether you sell it, whether you take it public, whether you give it to your kids, or whether you keel over dead at your desk, you're going to have an exit, and you want the thing to be worth something at the exit point. So, right?
Okay, I love that.
All right. So those are the people that we look for on a professional basis. And within that world, we prefer, and we filter for this. We prefer to work with people who are generative leaders, who are fast learners, who want to sort of move ahead and do something bigger than what they're doing now. So it's not the end of something; it's the beginning of something new. So that's more of a personal aspect, but that's what we layer in on top of the market side. Now, at the same time, we have a capital fund. And this sort of approaches the problem from the other end. So you can imagine that on one hand, you have people who want to drive value in a business and will be interested in zero limits ventures for that reason. They want to accelerate the value of the business and sell it or not sell it or whatever. And so that's one sort of thread. The other thread are companies that are, in my world, impact companies. So these would be, for me, it would be companies that are in the enviro space or humanitarian space, or I'm particularly interested in female-founded companies that are in those spaces, and that are looking for capital. And so what we have is a really interesting strategy for them, which is, we have the capital, we're willing to provide the capital as an investor, but the provision that we place on the capital is you have to execute a valuation growth strategy. So you have to understand the value dynamics of what you're building. So we're not just capitalizing the business, we're also putting the business on a rapid value growth trajectory. You don't have to exit the business if you don't want to. We just want to make sure that the investments we're making are being maximized. And we know that our process does that. So that's sort of the two populations of people that we serve.
Excellent. All right, I'll end with my final question. When you think about somebody has created Steve Little, right? Mom and dad, but there's somebody that's been the most influential to you in your life. Mm-hmm. Who is it? And what did you walk away with?
Well, I can give you a bunch of answers. I think the one that probably is the most relevant to this conversation is, I'll just cheat and call him and say my dad, but that needs a little bit of explanation. My dad and I weren't very close. It wasn't, nobody did anything wrong. We just didn't grow up close. That's all. He doesn't resent it. I don't resent it. It's just the way we grew up together. Okay. But he did tell me one thing, and it's something that I use. I just used it just the other day, as a matter of fact. I asked him, how I find out about a certain thing. And he said, well, I don't really know in your world, but I know in my world that if I want to know about something, I go find the person who does it better than anybody else, and I ask him. And what I found is the person who really knows will have no problem answering you. I use that every day, I think. So in terms of impact on my life, I would have to say, tip from my dad, is something I use every day, and I've been doing this a long time. So I'm going to give him that seat for that reason. Now, there's other people who've had a big influence. I had an opportunity to work directly with Jack Welch years ago. That was very impactful. I learned an awful lot. So I've been blessed with a lot of great mentorship and leadership, but I also seek it out. So it's, I want to.
Jack Welch is one of my heroes.
Yeah.
Jack Welch is one of my heroes. So I've got to ask you, and then we'll close it out. You said you learned a lot from him. What's the one thing you learned from him that was really powerful?
Act, don't react.
Act, don't react.
Right. Part of the problem leaders have is the tendency to react. The problem occurs, whatever it is, internal, external, market, whatever. They don't stop and think through the implications of the actions they're about to take. Instead, they react, and they create a whole new nest of problems by reacting. So that piece of advice is a pure gold, is if you are really entangled in something, if you have a market issue, you have a customer issue, you have, an internal issue, a personnel issue, don't react. Stop yourself, think through, gather information, understand what's going on really, right? I mean, how many times have we been in a situation, the guy in the highway, right? It cuts you off in the highway and your reaction is, son of a gun, that's a reaction.
Right.
But what you don't know is that maybe he's racing to the hospital because his wife just got, admitted, or maybe his kid got, hit by a car, or, you don't know. So you react. I had a sales guy working for me years ago, went on a sales call. You'll appreciate this. And, he was on his way in to see a client, an important client, closing the end of a month, end of a quarter, all the pressure. And you know what that's like. There's a lot of pressure on a salesman at that time. And
Sure.
He's running into the building, and the guy he's going to see is running out the building through a revolving door. So as he goes by, he says, "Hey, John, I'm just coming to see you. How's it going?" The guy says, I'm on my way to the hospital. My wife just had a car accident. We're going to have to reschedule. Not thinking, reacting, he says, "Oh, that's great. I'll follow up with your secretary and reschedule."
Oh,
That was the last time that salesman ever saw that customer.
yeah.
Right?
Wow.
Act, don't react.
Don't react.
That's right.
Well, let's end it on that. I got to tell you, I could talk to you for hours because we're equally yoked, whether you know it or not. And what a blessing, man! The wealth of knowledge you have about helping businesses. It's like the 18 drivers, the 6 accelerators, your points, your process to help businesses get the most value. As anybody listening in, highly recommend Steve, and I say that because of countless other people who've told me about Steve. That's why I invited him to interview him today, because he is such a wealth of knowledge. But appreciate you recognizing your dad and Jack Welch as well. But I would love to continue this conversation because I think we might be. We'll talk about the education system and what we can do about it.
Yeah,
but
right.
I've always said, if you're not solving the problem, you are the problem.
You are the problem. No, that's a fact. That's absolutely the fact.
So you're not allowed to complain. You're allowed to rain on whatever that problem is to go fix it.
That's
So
right.
if we all took responsibility and owned it, we wouldn't be where we are today.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Well,
hey, look, thank you so much for
time.
your time. This has been tremendously fun, and I appreciate the work you guys are doing a great deal. And I've enjoyed getting to know you and know your husband, and I look forward to many, many years of collaboration.